of tonight is Fight the Good Fight. How did you enjoy the lesson this week? Did you learn anything new?
Did you enjoy the lessons?
Did you enjoy?
It's great.
Did you learn anything new? Yes, yes. So I want to re-emphasize. I know I did this at the first week, and I don't know if I've done it since then. I really encourage you to do these lessons separately, not together. Separately, and then come together and discuss them. It's really easy in a relationship to lose your voice and just share what the other person's saying. I always go back to The Runaway Bride. How many of y'all seen Runaway Bride? It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. It's an old rom-com. And Julia Roberts, she keeps getting engaged and leaving the guys at the altar because she never knew what her voice was. And this reporter goes through and interviews all of the guys that she left at the altar. And one of the questions he always asked was, how did she like her eggs? And every one of them said, just like me, da-da-da-da-da. And every one of them was different. And because she didn't know what she liked, she always just took on what the person she was with liked. But she could never seal the deal because she was never true to who she was. So that's why I really encourage you, as you're doing these workbooks, that you take the time and sit before the Lord with the questions and ask him the questions and talk to him about him and find out what's really in your heart. Who you really are, what's your voice, what's your dreams, what's your fears. And then you can come together and talk about that, because if you start talking about it, it's really hard to explore that if you've not explored it on your own. Unless you're just an extreme high extrovert, out loud thinker, then it's really easy to do that. Because I'm that way a little bit. But I still need that time by myself.
And most out loud thinkers are not paired with other out loud thinkers, otherwise there'd be a lot of yelling and nothing ever get done. So, am I right? So oftentimes the internal process, or whoever they are in the relationship, sometimes will take longer to get things figured out. But if you're pressing together, all of a sudden it's the louder voice that gets heard, and it's kind of,
and you don't want one of you to disappear at all. You want both of your voices to be heard. So make sure you discover what your voice is as you're going through this, and take that time by yourself to do the workbook.
Because each of you are important as individuals, and you're important as a couple.
Correct.
The health of the couple depends on the health of each individual in the couple.
So here's a test. We have a test right now. Y'all ready for the test?
Okay.
The goal of every confrontation should be
Connection.
Yay! Good. That's the purpose and the goal of every one. So, and one of the things is we talked about knowing when and how. When is, you need to know when are your healthy times. Most of detrimental, painful fights happen after 9 p.m. when people are tired. A lot of times in our house early on, it was when I was PMSing. It's a real thing. It's true. And my hormones were like, and I'm like, can we talk about this next week? Because you don't want to know what I think today, because I don't know that it's not crazy. I sound a little crazy inside my head right now. So it's okay to wait.
Guys, when's the worst time to start up a discussion with guys?
When they're hungry.
When they're hungry.
When they're hungry, okay? Or right before bed, when you're ready to bed down for the night. And oftentimes you're paired with someone who, because I don't know if all women are like this, but my wife, when she gets still, all of a sudden she starts processing the rest of the day in her mind and replaying all the conversations she's ever had. Oh no, by the way.
What did you mean when you said this?
Right. When we were in the car and you looked at me, or you didn't look at me, whatever it is, and all of a sudden I'm like, I thought we were going to sleep now. So Just recognize you may be paired with somebody who, when they get still, all of a sudden they start.
So the goal is to get still before you go to bed so that you can process what you need to process, or put it on hold till the next day.
Or say, I'd like to discuss this with you. When would be a good time?
Yes.
That's not
So
a bad. That's not
these-
a bad situation.
Know your wins and set your boundaries for your wins. Be clear up front and set expectations for those kind of things. Because conflict's gonna happen, right? It is gonna happen, and it's healthy. But not every family, we've talked about this already in some of the other classes, grew up in a family where they had conflict. It just wasn't done. My family, my dad was a super avoider. He would not talk to my mom for a couple of weeks at a time. He would, yeah. It was, yeah. And we never knew why he was mad. Then all of a sudden one day he would be talking again, and it'd be like, well, okay. And my mom still talks. He's passed away now, but she still talks about. She goes, I never knew why he was mad that time. Like, you'll find out in heaven. Okay, it's all good. But maybe you never grew up around it, or it was taboo. It was bad. You were trained that conflict means that you're unhealthy. Your relationship's unhealthy.
You may have only seen unhealthy conflict modeled to you.
Yes.
And you may have made an inner vow saying, I never want to be like that. And so you avoid conflict because of fear of what you saw as a child. So that could be a thing.
So we want to talk about some healthy conflict tools for you. Did everybody get a little card? If you did not get a card, raise your hand in the air, and I'll have Levi get you one.
Everybody, each individual needs their own
Not per
card.
couple, per person.
All right.
So we need another one over there. Can
Right.
you help them out, Levi? Thank you. So were you surprised by Gottman's, as you were reading this, his researchers, that over 30 years he could identify and predict by 95% when they were studying a couple whether their marriage was gonna make it or not? Isn't that crazy, their accuracy rate? 95%. And it was all built on these 4 horsemen. Now, y'all are still dating, or you're engaged, you're not married yet, but we want you to be aware of them so you don't fall into those habits, because you may have grown up in a home where you saw some of this happening and you think, what we grow up with, that's our normal. That's how you deal with conflict. And maybe your parents got divorced, but that was your normal. So we're gonna introduce to you some new normals, and but we're gonna talk just a little
Did you
bit.
giggle?
Stop it. No, I'm okay. It's right there, but I don't need it. I'm
I'm
good.
gonna get the water bottle.
Oh, okay, no, I'm good.
Okay.
We talked about there's criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So the first one is criticism, and that's probably the first one that people are gonna step into. It's healthy to complain, but when you begin you have to complain without blaming. So when you start blaming on your complaint, it turns into criticism. So criticism, according to Gottman, involves attacking someone's personality or identity rather than their behavior. So a complaint is when we're driving down the road and you're texting, this is the situation, you're texting, I feel unsafe. It scares me. Everybody looked at you.
Well, I never do that. I have never ever
Yes.
looked at my phone while driving.
So, but with criticism, you also have to be careful with using, especially if you're a high I personality or a D, always and never are phrases that high I's like to use. It's just kind of part of because they're over the top a little bit. You always do this and you never do that. That was a big deal with me, and I had, because he didn't always do it, and he didn't never do it, but you have a tendency to embellish. So you have to be careful, because that can be very painful and hurtful to your partner. So avoid the always and the nevers. And with your criticisms, you have to be, I mean, with your complaining, not criticizing, but complaining, be aware of what the root of it is. Is it something that you've talked about? Or is it one of those hidden, unexpected roles or rules that you have inside of your head that they're not meeting up to? And if you have criticism coming out, is it really about the thing that you're complaining about? Take a beat. Is this really about his underwear on the floor? Is this really about him not showing up on time? What is this really about? So it's hosting that presence in the middle of those frustrations. When you feel the frustration rising, what am I really frustrated about? What am I feeling? And where does this come from? And how can I take this thing that wants to come out of my mouth? Like I said, it's like what did I call them? Shame.
A shame grenade.
A shame grenade.
Or
Or a blame bomb.
Blame bomb.
Blame bomb or a shame grenade.
I love that word.
Yeah, he was reading it today. And he was like, "That was really good, dog." I was like, "Thank you." So, but before you let those come out, think about, this is an image bearer of Jesus in front of me. And now, how am I helping them become more like Christ with my statement? Now, if I complain about a behavior, that's one thing. But if I criticize a person that's in the process, that's a whole nother thing. Because then I'm not just accountable to them to clean up my mess, I'm accountable to him to clean up my mess. So realize that. And then the antidote is, think about what your motivation was. How did it make you feel? What's the feeling going on inside of you? And talk to your partner about your feelings. Use that little paper in the back of the book, and use I statements that we talked about. And then inviting Jesus into that situation.
Yeah. Criticism, she said, often sounds a lot like, not just, hey, your underwear's on the floor, but you're a slob.
Right.
That's assigning identity to a behavior, okay?
A complaint is, would you pick up your underwear off the floor? Because when you leave it, it makes me feel
Like you don't care.
that I'm your slave and you don't care about me, right? Or something like that. You can tell them how it makes you feel.
Yeah, as opposed to, so oftentimes we respond to defensiveness, we respond to criticism with defensiveness, right? When you feel victimized, whenever a critique or a complaint comes at you, and if you feel attacked, oftentimes our response can be defensive, okay? And what are you trying to do when you're in a defensive posture? What are you always trying to do? You're trying to protect yourself, right? So usually people who are defensive are trying to protect themselves. Not universally, but most of the times they're trying to protect themselves. What are they protecting themselves from? An attack on their identity, attack on their self, okay? Whatever is coming at them does not feel wonderful, okay? The problem is that sometimes this defensiveness can be a habit. And if you fall into the habit of defensiveness, I think I've discussed this before, where if I view a criticism, if I view a complaint as an attack on my person, hey, you left your underwear on the floor again. Well, you always leave your stuff on the floor. Okay, that's me taking that and internalizing it, thinking she's calling me a slob when she never did. You know what I'm saying? Or she's saying, hey, you always leave your stuff on the floor. Well, the other day I didn't, and you leave your stuff on the floor. Usually, defensiveness has two components. It is finding exceptions, finding the exception, and shifting the blame. Okay? It's not me, it's you. Okay? That's the unhealthy component
Or
of it.
making excuses, yeah.
Right. So that's the unhealthy component, is you're not owning your behavior, okay? If you own your behaviors, like, yeah, like, you left your underwear on this morning. I know, I'm in the habit of doing this for some reason, and I'm not sure why. Could you please, when you see me doing this, could you let me know in that moment? Maybe I'll remember and get in the habit of throwing it in the hamper. That's a whole different response than, well, you do it too. Well, I'm always having to pick up your bras and hang on the doorknob, or whatever it is, you know? So you have to be willing to own your behavior and correct. That's part of the antidote of defensiveness. Because again, defensiveness is being invulnerable. It's not facilitating connection. It is literally saying, stay away, you're not safe. I don't like what you're telling me right now. And honestly, sometimes all they're doing is saying, this is what it's like to me around you. And so you've got to be willing to listen to the heart of what they're bringing up. Because oftentimes it's very legitimate. Oftentimes it's not fun. It's not fun to hear when you've got a flaw that needs to be fixed. But if you just own it and ask for help, you'd be amazed that the dynamic changes just like that. Okay? Go ahead, Hank.
So, when that happens, when the defensiveness starts in and you don't feel like you're being heard, your complaints, it's really easy to escalate to contempt. And studies show that contempt is the #1 predictor of divorce. #1 predictor is contempt. And contempt is where you begin to dislike the person. Their behavior becomes their identity. You're a slob, you're an idiot, you're stupid, you're selfish, you're prideful, you're this, you're that. And you fabricate your own version of who your partner is, and that person is the enemy. And you begin to treat them like the enemy. And your words, the way you say it, the way your body language is, you turn yourself away, you roll your eyes, you know, there's this contempt. You've seen people with contempt, haven't you? Yes.
You may have operated in contempt.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of teenagers do that towards their parents, and I'm like, oh, no, no, no. No, no, no. It's really easy to fall into that. If you allow people to come around you and you take your criticisms to friends and they begin to pile on or agree with, or they begin to build out a scenario, a story about your partner as you're talking about them, that will feed that level of contempt because you're building a story that is not Jesus' story. What is Jesus' story about the person beside you? How does he feel about him? What does he think about him? What's the vision? That's why we write vision statements, mission statements. That's why I want you to dream in this class. I want you to get revelation and write it down, because if the enemy starts to come in down the road and tell you lies about who they are because he hates marriage so much, you can get this book out and say, no, this is what God says about my spouse. This is who they are. This is what I believe, and I'm aligning with the Word of God, that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, that they have a purpose and a future and a hope, and they're creative and they're smart, and they have the mind of Christ, and they're powerful. That's what I believe, and I'm not going to believe anything else. So instead of fighting against them, align yourself and fight for them. Use your power as an ally, because you are powerful.
Yeah. She said. Jeez.
Sorry. I hate contempt. It's the devil.
Stonewalling. You'll notice I got a grid up here on this cool whiteboard thing.
You got to play on the whiteboards.
It was awesome. Criticism. Ooh, what's that? Okay, I'm doing. Criticism can evolve into contempt. But also a response to criticism is often defensiveness, right? And contempt is like elevated criticism, stonewalling is like elevated defensiveness, right? So, stonewalling is basically when you are so emotionally charged by whatever the conflict is that you just cannot handle it. Basically your circuit breakers are popping and you are like, the only safe thing for you to do, I've heard it's described also in accidents, aviation accident scenarios, where it's called looking through a soda straw. When things are getting so intense and you're getting overwhelmed and you're so threatened, your safety is so threatened, that you lose your peripheral vision, you can't breathe, or your breathing is rapid and shallow. It's like looking through a soda straw and you lose fine motor functions, you can't speak intelligently. And you wonder why people wind up in these fights, okay? It's a response of your brain when you go into this fight or flight mode. When things are getting so intense, you can result in stonewalling, okay? And stonewalling is basically freezing and not acknowledging, not engaging, and closing your heart off to this person in front of you for whatever reason, okay? It can happen in those intense situations. What is really dangerous is when that becomes a go-to response, okay? That is when you're choosing. It's almost like a passive-aggressive thing. It's literally the definition of passive aggression is when you close yourself off and refuse to engage. You don't even nod, make eye contact, or even make any noises like, yep, I'm listening. They could be yelling at you or whatever, and you're just standing there. Okay? That's stonewalling. And that can be an extreme response. Not healthy. We can stonewall. It's usually a response, it's a fear response. What are you afraid of? You could be afraid of how they're going to respond to anything you have to say. You could be very afraid of your own response, what you're about to do next. Okay? I think that's an example you said of what maybe your dad was doing.
Yeah, my dad, when he would do that, he had huge anger problems when I was little, and when my older siblings, it was bad. And then he went into the pout, my mom called it pouting, and he would just stonewall. But I think it was so that he wouldn't react in rage.
So, and it's ultimately a punishment of your partner, is what you're doing, is you're trying to punish them, you know, and it's how it's interpreted. It can take many forms. It can be just basically be completely silent. It can be, you know, all of a sudden you're disengaged and looking at your phone, or whatever. It can manifest as alcoholism, as porn addiction, as various things, okay, if it's not addressed.
Video game addiction.
Video game addiction.
I know
okay?
a lot of couples over the years that they quit going to bed together because one of them would just stay up and play video games.
Yeah. The antidote seems kind of counterintuitive, that when it starts to happen, the doctor's response is, what should you do if you see this occurring? Stop. But that's what you're doing right now. You're stopping everything. What your response need to be is, if you either feel yourself doing it or you're witnessing it occurring, is reschedule the conversation for a later time. Because what has happened is this person is so enmeshed and tied up with fear that they cannot function. Okay? You may not know what's causing the fear. Now's not the time to figure it out. Take at least a 20-minute break or longer and agree to a time to come back and revisit the conversation when you both had a chance to calm down. Physiologically, it takes at least 20 minutes to calm down. Okay? So take a half-hour break. Okay? Do something. Establish a signal. Okay, do something. It's like, and it could be something like, just simple as this. I'm done. I can't right now.
Or time out.
Or time out. Do something.
Red flag on the play. Red flag on the play.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Establish a safe word or a safe signal or something. Especially if you've experienced this in the past and you know it's a thing. That's Third Rock from the Sun salute. But,
We love that show.
but literally the best antidote for this is to stop. Go do something soothing, which could be walk around the block. Could be, I don't know, go eat an ice cream cone. Do something that takes your mind off that situation. Maybe even separate. You know, go to different rooms, go to your corners, cool down for a minute, and then come back and revisit the conversation. Okay? If that's occurring, that's how you fix it. And then it's time to be sure, because someone can mistake your attempt to fix your stonewalling with further stonewalling. Because he's like, I just gotta leave right now. Guess what? That's removing yourself from the situation, and they can. If you don't establish a time when you're going to come back and reconnect, they're going to think he's leaving forever. She's gone forever. I've had that. We've had fights, and one has, I just got to go. And that is the worst feeling in the world if you don't know if she's leaving for good.
Because I grew up with a dad that pieced out, you know.
Right.
So early on in our marriage, I was like, I got to go take a drive. Because, you know, I have a really sharp tongue. I can process really quickly, and I can say things really. I don't want to say anything that I'm going to regret. I'm going to go drive around the block.
Yeah. And so, what would I do? About 5 minutes, call her. Hey, are you coming back? Are you coming back? Are you coming back? What are you doing? What are you doing? I'd start hailstorming her.
Yeah.
Okay. She was trying to turtle, and I'm hailstorming her. So, you know, either one of you can do this. Okay. And so it's really important to establish, like, I'm going to go drive around for 20 minutes. Guess what? 20 minutes is a magical number. It gives you enough time to calm down. And when you're in that 20-minute break, don't sit there in that time and going, he always does this every single time. And just keep your emotions spooled up. Think about something else. Put on some worship music. Do anything other than dwell on what the conflict is. Then come back, take a breath, and start it up again. Okay?
One of the things with these, if you'll notice, criticism.
Wait.
This is on pencil. Okay. Criticism, and then they defend, and then you criticize, and then you defend, and then you criticize, and then you defend, and you get up in this circle, and then it's the same here. Contempt leads to stonewalling. Contempt leads to stonewalling, and you get into a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
One of you has to be powerful and break the cycle. I'm angry at the situation, but I refuse to disconnect from you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even scream that. I'm so angry, but I am refusing to disconnect from you. I love you. I hate what you're doing, but I love you. I don't like you right now, but I love you and I need to stay connected to you.
I'll be back in 20 minutes.
Choose to be powerful. Can we stop and can we pray?
That is a thing that works. Especially when you pray for 20 minutes straight in tongues, which she has done to me.
Yeah, but my nephew came to live with us when he was about 13. When he was about 18, they got into this knockdown, drag out. They're screaming at each other.
Over the location of a coffee maker.
Yeah, I don't even know why I don't remember why they were fighting.
I don't even drink coffee, but that was it. Anyway.
Yeah. So they're yelling at each other and it's escalating, and I'm finally like, okay, just let me pray for just a second. I prayed in tongues for about 10-15 minutes, and by the time I'm done, Chuck goes, I'm good. Tim goes, I'm good too. They just, but it's, you know, that's funny. It's true, but it is funny.
It does have a little effect.
But another thing you can do is say, let's go both write down what we're feeling. So you're writing it down, you're making it clear as you're writing, because when you're writing something, you're clear usually with it. Writing it down, making it clear, and then reading it back or sharing it with each other. And then repeating back. So is this what just the tools that we learned last week. So what I'm hearing you say here is that I'm really frustrating you. My behavior is making you afraid. You feel abandoned when I do this, or when I'm gone all the time, or when I'm on my phone, you feel lonely and you're feeling lonely right now, so you're reacting. So whatever it is, you're reaching for those feelings.
I can't overstate the importance of and the calming effect of just doing that one little step. If you get in the habit of doing that, if you're in a cycle of fighting and escalating, just that one step of repeating back what you heard the other person say, just doing that one thing will calm you down and calm them down. All of a sudden you're connecting on a level that you are not used to doing. So if you find there's probably just one topic that you guys, if there's one topic that you guys fight about a lot, and every time it's brought up, it winds up being a fight. Try that next time. Just try it. And see if the dynamic doesn't change. You don't even have to come to a solution. All you have to do is hear the other person, and if they know that you heard them, that's huge. Okay? That often de-escalates a lot. Sorry.
No. So I want everybody to say, repeat after me, I am powerful.
I am powerful.
Now say it like you mean it. I am powerful. Okay.
Good.
That's good. Okay, so one of the tools that we talk about to avoid the big blowouts is avoid gunny sacking. Did y'all know are y'all familiar with that term, gunny sacking? So it's like a toe sack. A gunny sack is like a toe sack. Do you know what a toe sack is? Okay, so grew up in Oklahoma.
Don't backpack.
Don't backpack. There you go. Don't throw all of your frustrations every time they do something wrong into a backpack, because eventually that backpack's gonna bust open. And it's gonna bust all open all over your relationship. And
Ephesians 4:26. Don't let the passions or your emotions lead you into sin. Do not let the anger control you, or be fueled for revenge, not even for a day. That's the whole verse. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Okay? It's saying, don't keep it inside.
go ahead.
No.
I jumped on yours.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. I just want to say that
Okay.
one part. And what is the final part of that?
Keep your list short. Right? Keep them short. Don't bottle. Don't bottle it up. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for you physically.
Yeah.
They said also people with contempt in their heart, things that they've bottled up that turns into contempt, have more sickness and colds, infectious diseases. People
It's like-
with contempt in their heart.
Clinically proven.
I'll never forget going through an inner healing training when we lived in Florida, and this guy was talking about how important forgiveness is in inner healing. And he was doing this. Did I tell you the story about this conference and the lady coming up with arthritis hands?
No.
Did I tell you? Okay, I don't want to repeat stories. So this lady comes up, older woman, and her hands are completely crippled, like arthritis. And she wants prayer for healing, and so he starts praying for her, and the first thing he hears is like, do you have a sister? And she's like, no, I don't have a sister. I don't have a sister, and I'm not healed. So she went and sat down. So the second night she comes back up. I want healing. He comes up to her and he goes, I just keep hearing you have a sister. She goes, no, I don't have a sister. Third night she comes up and she's bawling. And it's this older woman. She's like probably in her 70s. And she goes, I haven't talked to my sister in 50 years. And he goes, let's do some forgiveness here. And she forgave her sister and her hands were healed. Completely straightened out. Unforgiveness, bottling it up, doesn't just hurt you, doesn't just hurt them, but it can affect you physically as well as emotionally.
Your body, soul, and spirit are a lot more integrated than we Westerners give credit for. We are integrated beings, and one thing will affect the other. I promise you.
Can you do this one?
Okay. Pick your battles. This is how I find my battles, right? Filter out the unimportant things and remember that you're working together to build a new kingdom, right? So, when you are when there is a confrontation that needs to occur, again, don't shy away from it, but stay on topic. Don't bring up every other offense that are other offenses that are completely unrelated to the topic at hand.
Don't pull out your list.
Don't pull out your list and go through the entire thing, outlining every offense that has ever occurred to you. Those of you who keep those types of lists.
I keep one, no, I don't. I love
So-
lists, but not that kind.
Because stay on topic, and then apply. It may be very helpful to apply the conflict barometer. This is your friend. Would you like to explain the conflict barometer?
Yeah, so sometimes you're fighting, and for the D's in here, raise your hands. Okay, everybody look at the D's. Okay, it's either your first or your second one. You're not afraid of conflict, and you just want, and you kind of like to, you know, you probably should have been on a debate team somewhere at some point in time. You don't, debating's fun. It's a little bit of fun, and so you get on a topic and you're like really heated.
You'll choose a side, whether or not you believe in it.
And if your partner is not high D and they're very, very passionate about it, then it might be time to stop and you both are pretty, you know, up there and say, so let's take out the conflict barometer and look at this. And so for me, a lot of times I'm like, oh, well, I don't see it the way you do, but I may be wrong. I'll be like a 2 on the barometer. And Tim's like, over my dead body, I'm a 10 on this barometer, you know? So you may be at opposite ends, but really because you want to win the fight and you don't want to be wrong, you're in it to win it. And so if you do the barometer about how you really feel about that particular topic, it gives you a whole lot of insight into what's going on. Oh, so why don't you tell me why that's so important to you? Tell me a little bit more about that. Get into that and ask them some questions. Why is that important? How does that make you feel? Is this a trigger from their past? You don't know. So where did that feeling come from? Is it just this or is it something else?
Chances are that closer to a 10 it is, the more it's not about what you're talking about. It's probably something, it's probably tied to something beneath the surface that the other person's not even aware of.
And as you're doing this, don't be afraid to say, how can we do this better? How could I have said that better? How could I confronted you better? Like we even had one of these today. I said something and I'm in task mode, I'm typing and I make a comment to him from my task mode instead of my relationship mode. And I saw him immediately shut down and I was like, oh, that sounded harsh. I didn't mean it harsh, but I was just task. And so I stopped and I'm like, okay, I can feel you disconnect. How could I have said that better? I didn't mean to hurt you. I wasn't attacking you. We were talking about something from the past. But how could I have said that better?
And for me, just me acknowledging the fact that, yeah, that felt kind of harsh. That's a huge thing for me, just to say that. Because I would often say, no, it was fine. Don't worry about it. I'm the guy that would sweep it all under the rug and pretend it didn't bother me. But it really kind of did. Even if it's not a lot, just a little bit. You know, and that's that whole thing. I'm not gonna let it affect me. Well, guess what? Stuff affects you. Okay? And the more you own it and acknowledge it, less of it's sitting in that backpack weighing you down. Okay? Now it's out on both of you deal with. Okay, let's deal with it. It's gone.
And don't be afraid if you say something and they react and you're like, what just happened? Go, what did you hear me say?
Could you repeat back to me?
Obviously what my heart was saying was not what you heard. So can you tell me what you heard? Because we're gonna stay connected, right? If they disconnected or they just escalated, so ask them, what did you just hear right there? I'm like, oh wow, so I'm talking on my D side, I need to relate, slow down.
That's good. All right. And then the I feel